Okay, it's time for some honesty now, folks. All right, so the point of this address is to talk about discipline. All right, I'm the person that I can tell you right now that just because a person doesn't seem disciplined in things that you think that they should be disciplined in doesn't mean that they don't have discipline. And what that means is just because somebody spends all their money on shoes, clothes, going out to the club, that doesn't mean they don't have discipline. They have discipline enough to make sure that they're dressed nicely. They have enough discipline to make sure that their hair is good, their shoes is good, their clothes is good. And when they go out to the club, they looking good. They trying to get whatever mate, or they're trying to just hang out and have fun. But the whole point is that when you go out, you ain't gonna be able to say nothing about me. You ain't gonna be able to talk about the way I dress. I got discipline to make sure I look good, but they don't have discipline to make sure that they're economically stable. They don't have discipline to make sure that the bills are paid, that all the bills are paid, or maybe they ain't paying their cell phone bill so that they can buy the new pair of shoes. So just because people aren't disciplined with their economics doesn't mean that they don't have any discipline. People have discipline. In order to achieve our goals and to achieve what we want to do as ADOS people, we have to have discipline. But we have to have discipline towards our economics. We have to have discipline towards our political goals, right? And in order to have that type of discipline, we have to be willing to sacrifice a couple of things. You got to be willing to sacrifice buying some Jordans in order to look good. And it's the concept that we got to be able to sacrifice being able to go to the club and look good and get all the compliments and get all the attention. We got to be willing to sacrifice that. We got to be willing to go someplace with other people, and then somebody say something about your shoes and it not really affect you, But when you go out to these places and they talk about your shoes, but at least you can say, hey, I got money in the bank. But necessarily that's not something that's of huge value to some of our younger adults. They want to look good, they want to floss, they want to brag about how they look, they want to get the baddest chicks. And in order to do that, you got to have those good looking clothes. You got to have those expensive Jordans, those expensive shoes, those true religions. So when we're talking about sacrifice and dedication, that's where we need to really redefine that for our people, especially for our younger people. Remember that in my previous video, I was telling you guys, not in one of my previous videos, I was telling you guys we need to stay focused, right? In order to stay focused, but focus on what? Focus on getting our reparations for the American descendants of slaves. In order to focus on those reparations, we got to be disciplined politically. We cannot give in to these politicians who are coming up to us and giving us these really bland offerings that are not tangible. They're coming up to us telling us nice things to our face. We can't give in to the politicians. We can't give in to even some Pan-Africanists. We can't give in to some of the things that they're saying unless it is actually tangible. I'm not saying that we can't work with Pan-Africanists, but the plan, whatever they're giving us or whatever they're telling us, there has to be something tangible at the end, something that we can see, and something that is feasible. That's all that I'm saying. Okay, so we got to be disciplined in making sure that any plan that we take or any plan that we try to execute or any initiative that we execute, it has to be a disciplined initiative where we can measure what we have to put in and what we're expected to get out of it. It has to be a disciplined initiative like that. Now, in my previous video, my very last video, I was telling you guys, okay, about how the media, how how the white supremacist system is using the media, how they're using that media to attack black people, how they've been using that in the right after the civil rights movement, after they really fine-tune how they're going to use television and movies in order to really downgrade our value system with blaxploitation films, with hip hop, all these really bad values that they're putting into these forms, these art forms, these media platforms, where they're including drugs, violence, nudity, sex to an extreme degree. But of course, when you go to their media platforms, such as, let's say, country music, you don't see that level. You don't see the same level of violence and depravity over there when you're looking at white people's media. They don't allow it, but they'll allow it for ours. But so, in order for us to really defeat this media attack that's being put onto us, we have to have our own self-discipline to say, what you're representing in these television shows and this music doesn't represent our values, doesn't represent my values, and we need people at a younger age. I'll even go to the age of 18, 19, probably earlier than that. We're getting really into the territory of parenting. And we already know that we have a lot of issues in terms of parenting with the single parent homes. And it's very difficult in our neighborhoods where you have all these bad influences. I said this in my last video, where they have the music bumping loud with all these negative values in there. And how can we really control, giving our kids a positive message when these other messages are being portrayed and just being there in our community, and we can't really control it. So that's the thing. So we got to have the discipline in order to carry out our agenda. We have to have the discipline in order to really define what media is good for our community and what media is not, and what messages are not. And that's why I don't believe that calling the ADOS movement a leaderless movement is necessarily a good definition for it. Because if we do that, if we call it that, then that means anybody can step up and come up with their own definition and their own agenda within the ADOS. So what we're going to have is a bunch of people coming out with their own agendas, and the goals of those agendas are not going to mean empowerment for our people. And there are going to be agendas that are going to stray away from reparations, right? There are going to be agendas out there that put in values that we don't really that we shouldn't really even be valuing in order to empower ourselves. So we got to really be careful about who's putting out what. And only legitimate people should be putting out what the agenda should be. And what it has to be is sort of a consensus between some of our most intellectuals. I'm just going to say it on Black YouTube, because that's where the ADOS movement really started to spring from, is YouTube, Twitter, some social media sites. So we have to really designate who has the ability and the right to really define the agenda. And if that's the case, they would be sort of a leader figure. So it's not going to be exactly a leaderless movement. To be honest, I don't even think white people don't even have a leaderless movement. You just can't. Their leaders are so high up, you just don't see them. But there's people at the top that are paying the Carl Tuckersons, the Megyn Kellys. They're getting paid by somebody up at the top. They're getting orchestrated by somebody up at the top. All these white supremacist cops Out here, they're getting paid by somebody. They're being told what to do by somebody, and they're being protected by somebody at the top. So there is leadership in white supremacy, even if you don't see it directly, but they just have the money and the power to hide themselves. So I'm going to leave you guys with this. Stay disciplined, stay focused, and whenever you get a chance, whenever you talk to your children or to young people, tell them to be economically disciplined and socially disciplined. Make sure that they're saving money. Make sure that they're looking into investments. Talk to them about maybe getting into some investments. Tell them that, it's not the most important thing in the world to look good going to the club just to get the really hot chick who might not be there in the next few years for you. Because that's what they think is the most important thing in the world. I said this in my last video. Black relationships are being dictated almost by reality shows. That's what black people expect from their relationship. Look at Love and Hip Hop. And that's just disastrous for us because that's just not the reality. You can't have a relationship like that where people have tattoos all over their body, got jewelry, got the latest clothes. Where's all the money coming from to pay for all of that stuff? A lot of people will just be broke after they pay for that stuff unless they got a mixtape not a mixtape, unless they got a record deal or something like that to that effect. Unless they got a lot of money, maybe from their parents. And the situation is with inheritance with black people in America. It's not that we're not getting that much inheritance from the previous generation. So more than likely they're spending every single penny that they get their hands on the latest clothes, on some tattoos, and then when they get older, they're going to be struggling, trying to get their life back together. So we got to say something, and unless we start telling the younger people, hey, you got to at least make sure your economics are in order, the best you can, get some investments. If we can get young people to start thinking about investments and start trying investments, then we're doing something good, man. We're doing something progressive that will positively affect the next generation.